So this month's challenge is loneliness, and after talking to Steve and also going on, I suppose, a little bit of a personal journey for myself and trying to find out what loneliness means to myself, I wanted to put into a photo the difference between sort of loneliness, solitude and isolation. And to do that, I'm going to use one of these Newton's cradles. And the concept is to take 3 shots of this. One of these is going to have just one of these balls in the middle, and that's going to be isolation. One's going to be exactly the same as this, but having one missing. So you've got the 3 together and one all by himself, and that's loneliness. And then the third one is going to be the most tricky, and that's going to be having the one in the middle, but moving and swinging by himself, having a bit of fun, enjoying the space around him, and that's solitude. So that's my idea. Now this third image is going to be the hardest one, because that's going to have what's called a long exposure and shutter speed, and that's what I'd like to talk to you today about as well. But before I do that, let me just show you the light settings and setup here. It's fairly simple. Now this is a very big diffuser. In fact, it's just tracing paper held up on a frame. The reason why we do this is very reflective and it's a nightmare to shoot, so you need a nice big reflective surface. But if it wasn't for the fact that these are chrome and reflective, then we would literally just have one light source there. And the only other light I've got is down low here and just shine on the background. And if I adjust that, you'll see that it changes the sort of gradient of the background. So the camera's going to be sort of in front here, almost where this the video camera is now, and it's going to be shooting directly down there with the background here and this light coming from the right hand side shining on the products. It's a fairly simple setup, and to get those 3 images, I'm going to put them all together so you have 3 which looks like they're going to be on a shelf, very similar to what you're looking at now. So that's the setup, but like I said, I want to talk about shutter speeds and long exposures. So that's all part of what's called the exposure triangle, which is made up of 3 things, which is ISO, shutter speed and aperture. But today we're going to talk about the shutter speed. So shutter speed, I'm sure you've heard of the term before, or long exposures, can really enhance the look of an image and to increase that sort of feeling of time passing in an image. So it can be quite a useful tool to learn. Now most cameras will have, well, every camera will have a shutter speed, but some of them won't allow you to access them. So mobile phones and smartphones and small little compact cameras, they'll all have a shutter working in there, but sometimes it will be on full automatic mode, so you won't be able to have that creative control over it. But if you do have a camera, and say some mobile phones will have long exposure modes now, or obviously bigger cameras like this will have access to the shutter speed directly with one of the sort of dials here, because it's one of the key components in how cameras work and gives you that creative control. So one thing you will need as well for shutter speeds is a tripod. Although nowadays you do have image stabilization with a lot of cameras, if you do have a solid tripod you cannot beat it, because as we increase the shutter speeds of these cameras, any movement of the actual camera itself is going to blur the image as well. So what the shutter speed is the shutter itself is almost like a pair of curtains which open and shut, and as the name suggests, you can change the time they're open and shut for, and the longer they're open for, the more light lets through and the brighter the image is. But also the longer they're open for, whatever moves in that image while they're open will be captured, and that's normally captured as a blur. This is where you can have effects, and I'm sure you've seen it before, where you may have a waterfall all blurry, or someone's taken a capture of the sea and it's all nice and still and perfectly calm, or maybe the cloud, you can see the clouds are sort of blurred and have that sort of sense of movement in there. And if you were shooting sports or anything fast moving, you'd want a very quick shutter speed, maybe 1/1000th of a second, to freeze that motion, to make sure there's no blur. If it's a sprinter running down a track, you want to make sure it's all completely perfectly in focus, and you need a very quick shutter speed to do that. Wildlife photography uses fast shutter speeds. So the shutter speed I used for this particular image was only actually around 1/2 a second long, but that gave enough time for the one ball bearing to move from left to right and leave that trail behind it to show that motion. And obviously because nothing else moved in the image, everything else is perfectly in focus and with no blur. So that's how shutter speeds work, really useful tool. This is the actual final image, so I'm really happy with it. So it shows that series of the isolation, the loneliness, and then the solitude as well. So that was my image for loneliness, but I'm really looking forward to seeing some of yours. So please do send them through. And at the same time, if you think it would help your image, then why not try a long exposure?